how when the government official came to him for the $7,000, he said, "You're not going to mess with this company because this company is not going to compromise on its value systems. We had already spoken about values in class, so anyone in here who's taught on a regular basis knows when the students are learning about something that's reinforcing what they've already learned in the class, heads start nodding. So the students start nodding. That's right, you don't go against your values. The corrupt person would say, there's no point in wasting my time on these people because there's no return on investment. I'd rather go with somebody else. Head nodding continues. And then there's no value system which is free. It always means you'll have to pay a certain price for your convictions and beliefs. And they're more than happy to pay $140,000 cash, US dollars, in order to say they didn't go against their values. And the students, this is probably the one video case where the students get the most excited about it, because here's this man who's trying to change the culture. He's making these great statements. He's walking the walk. And so everyone agrees with him and says they would do the same thing. And it seems so straightforward. It seems so black and white. But at the end of the day, it's not black and white. Yes, it may cost you. And yes, you may have to pay, and it may cost you in other ways than monetary value. In this case, it was $140,000. It may cost you, you've got to be willing to pay it to stand by your convictions and beliefs. That's all good and well. But the year this happened, Infosys had revenues, that's a lot of zeros. Infosys' revenues that year were just over $4 billion. Could they afford to pay $140,000 so as to maintain their dignity? Absolutely. When the students see the $4 billion, two things happen. Everyone stops shaking their head, and someone almost always whistles. $4 billion. So what winds up happening then is those students who don't have $4 billion at their disposal, they're forced to rethink how they would deal with that situation. And I had one of those moments that we all love, where a student comes up to you after class. I had this student sat. I've gotten some odd disorder. I can't remember names, but 20 years later, I can tell you where you sat. The student sat front, right over here on my left. And she came up to me after class, and she was probably in her late 20s, but her dad was the founder and president of a small business. And so we were talking, and she said, you know, throughout the whole case, I thought I knew what we would do. Now I'm not so sure. I don't know what we have done. And to me, that was key, because she came into it thinking black and white. Oh yeah, we wouldn't pay the bribe. We wouldn't do this, we would do it. Then she thought about it and realized, wow, I don't know what, we don't have $140,000 because we're a small business. I don't know what I would have done. And it got her to think. And for me, that was extremely important. And it touches on one of the hurdles, and these are all, the first three are issues that I've dealt with students. The last one is more of a personal issue. The first hurdle is, on the first day of class, a student will say, you can't teach ethics. You can't teach me to do what's right. And this is just I don't speak for anybody else up here, but I don't see my job as teaching you how to be ethical. My hope is exactly what happened with that student, Katie. I do remember Katie, is to just get her to think about ethics. So instead of doing that snap decision, and you actually, like Grace Ann said, you make it real for the student. I was happy that she just stopped and thought, instead of saying, I wouldn't pay the bribe. So you can't teach ethics. I don't see that as my job. My job isn't to teach you. Who am I to tell you what's right and wrong? I just want you to stop and think before you make decisions. We've had some long discussions about cases, and it's just kind of like there's the 10% who will do the wrong thing, there's the 10% who will do the right thing, there's the 10% who will ask, is this going to be on the test? And this past fall, I had a student, we were talking about, I don't remember which case it was, we were talking about a case, He raised his hand, he was frustrated, and he said, "Can you just tell us what's going to be on the final?" and I never answered yes or no. It's just, I said, everything is important. So, but it does kind of reinforce that I guess I could say bottom 10%. They just want to know what they're going to need to pass the test. They don't want to have to think about an ethical dilemma. They just want to know, okay, so am I going to have to write a short answer question about this or a multiple choice response? So is this going to be on the test? And then the other issue that and maybe some of you all have run into this as well, and again, I think it's that bottom 10%, is the profit first mentality. There's a case, and I like the case just because I have young kids. There's a case I show, I don't remember the name of the company, and maybe someone will recognize the name. Brian Neesmith is the CEO of the company. And they were at a critical point. I don't remember if they were trying to work in acquisition or something. They were at a critical point in their company's being, basically. There's a multi-million-dollar deal that they were in the midst of. And one of his VPs was giving a presentation to the board, and he kept yawning. And so Neesmith stops the meeting, and he calls him out into the hallway. And he says, what's the matter? And he says, look, I'm sorry. I know this is really important, but we've got a 2-week-old baby at home. The baby was crying all night. I got no sleep. I'm down with the deal. I want to do everything I can to help you with it. I'm just beat. So Neesmith fires him on the spot. And he comes back. The clip ends with Neesmith reporting what the guy says. And then it is, how you handle the situation. No one in the class will ever say fire him. They always say talk to him, reconvene the meeting, take a 15-minute break, buy him a cup of coffee. No one ever says fire him. They come back, he says, I fired him on the spot. If he's not going to help us with this critical point in our business acquisition, I don't want him on board. And so there's some students who have this profit-first mentality. They will say, he did the right thing. It doesn't matter to me why the guy's not doing his job. He's not doing his job. And if it's that big of a high-dollar situation, he needs to be doing his job. And usually, there's some cases where people won't express an opinion and people roll their eyes or will even audibly say something like, ugh. That's one of them, when people say he did the right thing. But it's that profit-first mentality. The Infosys example, it's not uncommon to have someone just say, I paid $7,000. I just saved my company $133,000. That's money in our pocket. So the profit-first mentality I found sometimes can be a hurdle. From a personal standpoint, time. Because this isn't a standalone class on ethics. This is an integrated class on ethics. And this is a class I've been teaching for years that was very well prepped. So in order to include ethics, what has to happen? Something else has to come out. So you got to move stuff around, take stuff out, and you don't want to just do that haphazardly. So it's outside of the class is a large time commitment to figure out what's going to go where, and then also inside of the class. Before I integrated ethics, we would talk about ethics during the ethics chapter. So that was one class discussion. Now there's 16. So you kind of have to gauge the time. Maybe it's not so bad when they flop sometimes, because then you can move on. You don't get tied up. You don't like it when they do, but at least you move on. But it's a big time commitment. And I think that also leads to some of the frustration from that bottom 10%. Is this going to be on the test?